What's going on, guys? You know what? Today I just could not talk right. I'm flubbing all my words, and I'm trying to get some coffee in it because my brain just does not want to cooperate with me today. Although, I'm going to get a good night's sleep, and I'm going to come back tomorrow fresh and ready to go. The reason is because I've been helping my sister move. Her lease was up. She didn't feel like, having to go back with her lease because she got a new landlord and yada, yada, yada. You know how that kind of crap goes. And she decided to move back home with me and the family. So, that's neither here nor there. Point is that I'm just burnt out. So that's really about it, guys. But tomorrow I'm going to be having a friend of mine on again. His name is William Fawcett. I had him on a couple days ago. Avid prepper, militia member, true patriot, awesome guy. So I'm going to have him on with me. Bob, like I said, Bobby had to dip out with me earlier. He is helping Becky with her show, running the board with her. And that's really about it. I'm probably not going to be making an appearance on anybody else's shows tonight just because I'm beat. And my brain's like, F you, Z-Man, I do not want to help you with anything. So, yeah, just a quick announcement. I'm sitting here enjoying a nice cup of hot coffee at 6 o'clock p.m. and it's dark out. What the hell, guys? Why is it dark out? Why is it dark out now? I am so mad. I hate winter. I flip off my front yard whenever it's covered with snow. I don't know. My brain's starting to come back to me, guys. I'm like 3/4 of the way through this cup of coffee. God, I love the Keurig machine. My sister brought a Keurig machine with her. And as you can tell, I'm starting to pep up. I'm a little more hyper than I was before. It's because I have life-giving coffee. That's the whole thing, guys. I didn't have any of my coffee today, really. I haven't had my daily dose of vitamin coffee. So, yeah, now that my brain's starting to get into gear, I'm trying to think of some things that I want to talk to you guys about here. Yeah, it's nice to have caffeinated Z-Man here, not just tired, can't speak properly Z-Man. So I'm going to drink some more of my elixir of life here. Yeah, I'm going to keep on going until my family gets back. As you guys all know, I do the podcast from home. And I also have a family, and I can't tell my family to shut their face holes for all day long while I do podcasts. So, meanwhile, they're all tiptoeing around me while I'm doing this show, and I feel bad. So, I have to make sure I try to do as many podcasts as I can when I'm here alone, which is very rare because I have a large family. Let's see here. I love coffee so much. Coffee. Yeah, so me and Bobby were talking, and he was trying to get Tom Loopshoe, I'm sure some of you may know who he is, on the show. And I'm also fighting off a cold, so if I sound a little raspy, that's why. But that would be really awesome to have a discussion with him. I'm a fan of his videos, and I don't personally know, or I don't really know much about Yellowstone. That's where a lot of his suspicions are coming from. He thinks that the government knows something about Yellowstone that we don't, which is more than possible. It's definitely not unheard of that our government's keeping something from us that we ended up finding out was total crap, or so on and so forth. Point is, they either omit the truth or end up admitting the truth, and then we're all like, gee, when it's like 60 years down the line and nobody really cares anymore because it's not a current event. But, yeah. I honestly don't really even know anymore, folks. Things are just getting stupid in this country, and basically what me and Bobby were trying to get at a little earlier was just, like I said before, is just you need to always have authority. There always needs to be a system of checks and balances and people who keep the bad people at bay. But at the same time, when it comes down to it, you need to question authority as much as possible. You need to make sure that basically the whole question is who's going to police the police. And that's really what it comes down to, is if there's nobody that the police have to answer to, which they're supposed to be answering to us, we the people, that's really what it boils down to, is we need to get people ready to go for the worst possible case scenario, because they're showing more and more with Ferguson and all these other protests that they can't protect us, nor can they keep order as well as they like to think they do, or like to let us think that they can. So that's really what it comes down to, and that's why I'm a prepper, guys. That's really what it comes down to, is I have firearms, I have an extent of training that I know how to use them properly and safely. Because as I've said before, if you do not know how to use a firearm, if you're only what we call like a weekend warrior and you only go to a firing range maybe an hour every week, and I understand, guys, I totally understand. You don't have the luxuries that I quite do, if you want to call them that. I have a lot of acreage. I don't have to worry about harming anybody with my stray rounds because I have a hillside to fire into and over 60 acres to use. But my point is this, is that if you think that you're some kind of Call of Duty badass who's going to pick up a rifle and fight for your country when all you do is shoot it here and there for a hobby and maybe spend 1 or 2 magazines on the range on a weekend here and there, then you're not going to be able to handle yourself in a firefight. Now, personally, I'm one of those people. I grew up out in the country. My parents taught me, or I should say my father. My mother was never much of a hunter. My mother grew up in the city. As I said on the previous show, I was born in the city of New York. And then my parents decided when I was at a very young age, they wanted us not to be city kids. They wanted us to be self-reliant country kids because my parents knew this day was going to be coming. And my parents really aren't so much preppers as I am. My parents are normal, everyday, smart people. My mother works as a phlebotomist. My father works as an MRI technician. And I went to school to be a paramedic, and I don't work in that field right now. I am currently a sound guy and a stagehand, and that's really about it. I mean, I have the first responder training for the most part. I just choose not to be a first responder. It's just something that it's just not me. It's one of those things where it's one of those jobs where I don't want to do it because it makes me not happy. I don't like seeing, I grew up around it, and it's just kind of, I'm so bored with it. Excuse me. Like I said, I'm fighting off a cold, guys, so I apologize if my voice sounds a little screwy. Where was I? Anyway, damn it, cold, you made me lose my damn train of thought. The reason why I didn't want to be a paramedic is because I was around it all the time, and I didn't want to do that kind of stuff. Didn't want to see injured people all the time. I learned what I learned. And I honestly, I make a little more money making a living doing what I do. But all in all, I'm glad I have the training I do, and I know that I've put it to good use, and I've already helped people, and whenever I see a car accident, I try to stop and give aid if I can, but usually, obviously the first responders are already on their way. But I've witnessed a couple accidents happen right away, and I've got out and I've administered as much first aid as I possibly can with the limited medical supplies that I do carry with me. And that's another thing, guys. Carry a bug-out bag. It sounds funny, a lot of friends of mine like to bust my balls and say, hey, why you carry all that stuff? Because I have basically now that I just completed it, I carry what they call an active shooter kit. I have body armor that'll stop most North American common rounds. I have a book bag with space blankets. I have triplicates of almost everything, whether it's space blankets, ponchos. I have, just like very thin vinyl ponchos that are very compressible that can fit into the 2 or 3 can fit into one little pocket in a book bag. I have a very heavy pack. And everybody says, your pack's a little heavier than, they usually recommend 45, depending on your size, 45 to 65 pounds, depending on what you feel you can handle, and obviously your age and your shape. But anyway, back to what I was saying is I keep a lot of things in my pack. I have medical supplies. I used to have a mess kit, but I got rid of that to lighten up my whole thing. And a mess kit, being like plate, small camp pots and pans and stuff like that all kind of compressed together, just a whole camping cooking kit. But I got rid of that because it's kind of just a luxury that you really don't need to have on you if you're on the move and you need to travel light. Trying to think what else I carry in my bug out bag. A lot of paracord. I'm a very huge advocate of paracord or 550 cord, and I recommend buying Type 3 550 cord. I guess this is going to turn into a prepping podcast, guys. I recommend carrying or ordering Type 3 military spec 550 cord. I call it Type 3 mil spec 550 cord. The reason is because one strand has the tensile strength of about 550 pounds. So that means that you can string up a deer with it. You can use it to make a shelter. There's a whole litany of things you can do with paracord. My brain is going a mile a minute now. Thank you, caffeine. Let's think here. That just gave me an idea. I'm probably going to do some episodes on paracord, making paracord bracelets, what you can use paracord for. And a lot of you who know about the paracord bracelets, a lot of you are like, oh well, why would I want to use? I've had people actually say to me, well, why would I want to use that in an emergency for this, that, and the other? Like they were thinking more of a tourniquet. And I'm like, well, if you need it that quickly, then I recommend carrying a hank of paracord in your pocket. I have I'd say about 10, 15 feet spooled up into a tiny little bundle that I keep in. I usually wear like military style cargo pants. And I keep a hank of paracord in my left pocket. I keep, one or two of them. And they ended up coming in handy for just a simple thing. When I was helping my sister move, we lost one half of the ratchet strap we were using to ratchet strap down her mattress and everything to the trailer. And when we were doing that, the ratchet strap wouldn't reach around because the second half of the ratchet strap that we were using was, MIA. So what I did was pulled out the paracord, wrapped it, or tied it to one edge, made a big loop and tied it to one side of the trailer. And then I put the hook through the loop and tightened it down as tight as I could, and because I knew that the tensile strength of that cord would hold it there. And I wasn't worried about it going down the road or safety purposes because I knew that I was using really strong paracord. Now, I've had people ask me, and I'll tell you guys right now how you spot fake paracord. Real Type 3 550 cord uses, number one, uses high quality, I think it's polycord, they call it. I think it's made out of plastic. I could be wrong on this, but I believe it's called polyethylene. I mumbled that one, sorry. Anyway, the polycord that they use in military spec is typically capable of withstanding more abrasion, and it's just stronger in general. It tends to be a little thicker. The other thing is they use a lot of these companies without couth will sell you paracord that they say, oh, it's so, it's military spec paracord, but military spec paracord has 7 individual strands inside of the main sheath. So if you split open some paracord and it doesn't have it has less than 7 strands, then you got ripped off if you paid for mil spec anyway. I mean, if you just paid for polycord, as they call it, then you're getting what you pay for. But when it comes to military spec Type 3 550 cord, then you're going to want to use exactly what I just said, because the amount of strands that are in there, or it's also technically 14 strands because each individual strand also splits into 2 strands. But my point is this, is that you get about, depending on the weave of the paracord bracelet, if it's just a standard, what they call cobra braid, which is those skinny little normal paracord bracelets that you see, they are typically, I'm trying to think here, you can usually get about 8 feet out of them, maybe a little more depending on the size of your wrist. Like for me, I can usually get about 8 feet, 9 feet into a bracelet depending on how tightly I weave it. So, that's another thing. I sell paracord bracelets. I'm trying to figure out a way to get them out online, so to speak. But, so if any of you are interested, let the Rage Against the Regime podcast know. I do personal requests. I have a bunch of different colors. I can also make different buckles, stuff like that. For instance, I am wearing a paracord bracelet right now as we speak that has a little handcuff key hidden inside the buckle, so that if I ever get illegally detained, and that's exactly what it's for, obviously, if I ever get illegally detained, I can unsnap the bracelet with handcuffs on and obviously undo the handcuffs. So there's little things that I find on the internet that come in handy. There's also buckles that have safety whistles on them so that you can signal for help in the woods. There's ones that have fire starters built into them, which I have one of those. There's a whole bunch of different accessories that you can put on them, and or you can just make your own paracord bracelets and keep an eye out for my make your own paracord video. Because one thing that drives me nuts, it took me a long time to learn how to make even a standard paracord bracelet, because there's all these idiots who go way too fast and they don't explain properly how to do it. So I'm going to end up, when I have the time, sitting down and making a proper paracord bracelet video so that people can understand how to do it themselves, because that's the way I am. And I'm sure a lot of you out there who are listening to this are the same type of personality. I like to do things for myself. I don't like for instance, every paracord bracelet I've ever bought that was purchased, or I should say that was pre-made for me, was a piece of junk. So I know where to get good paracord. Like I said, if anybody's interested, I mean, I don't make a killing off of them. I haven't really sold very many. But if anybody's interested and they want a good, well-made paracord bracelet, I'm very good at it. Contact the RITR page and let me know. So, besides that, I'm trying to really think here. What else can you carry in your bug out bag that is useful? I carry 2 different chemicals in my bug out bag, and I think I've talked about it very briefly in other archived shows, but you don't have to go search through them because it was so brief that I wouldn't even be able to tell you which one it was on. You'd be going through hours of content. There's 2 chemicals. One is glycerin, which we all know. You can basically, for those of you who don't know where you can get glycerin, I'm not talking about nitroglycerin. I'm just talking about a more stable form known as glycerin. And glycerin is used in soap, bubbles, like the with the little dipping wand that you give to kids. That's just water and glycerin, pretty much. But yeah, glycerin can be used in medicinal forms. If it's taken orally, it can help with diarrhea. If it's taken suppositorily, which is shoving it up your bum, then it will get rid, or it'll help you with constipation, because it helps put moisture into the turd. I mean, I'm sorry to put it so bluntly, but that's basically what it is. So you can pick it up in the drug aisle of pretty much any supermarket, any CVS, any kind of major outlet. Anyway, and then anybody who knows anything about survival probably knows where I'm going with this. And there's another chemical that it's a little harder to get a hold of. It's not so common, called sodium permanganate. Or no, I'm sorry, excuse me, scratch the sodium. Potassium permanganate. There's 2 different chemicals, and sodium permanganate is a little bit different. Potassium permanganate is a chemical that actually works very well for a litany of different things. You can use it to soak your feet and kill bacteria. You can use it to, you mix it with water. You can purify the water for drinking. I wouldn't recommend drinking it for long periods of time because it is toxic. But just like bleach or anything else, you can drink it in your water for short-term survival. But you can also use it to kill, like I said, foot funguses, like athlete's foot, which in a situation where you can wash your feet, urinating on your feet will also work for athlete's foot and certain foot funguses too. So that's a little medicinal thing. Some people are like grossed out by that, but if you're like near a creek, if it's a survival situation, let's just say, and you're about to wash your feet off, piss on your feet and let it soak for 10, 15 minutes and then wash your feet, and that'll help kill the bacteria that's causing whatever is ailing your feet. Urine actually has a lot of medicinal purposes, and I'll probably go into that in a minute, but potassium permanganate can also be used, like I said, to purify water. You can use it to purify your feet. For like I said, the reason I'm talking about feet so much is the simple fact is that if you're out in the woods and you don't have access to medical care, you really got to take care of your feet. You got to wear a nice, if you're going to be out in the woods for a long period of time, one thing I would recommend, especially if it's for a bug out kit, is wearing what they call good road boots, something that's not going to tear up your feet, something that's comfortable that you can wear for long periods of time. They're not going to make you get blisters on the balls of your feet from walking extended periods of time, stuff like that. But anyway, back to the potassium permanganate. Potassium permanganate can purify, like I said, I'm repeating myself, and I apologize. Purify water, dress wounds, stuff like that. And then the really cool part about it is you can also use it mixed with glycerin, will combust with the proper amount. You leave a little mound, because potassium permanganate is a powder, and when you you place a pile of that powder on whatever surface you want to start a fire with, and then you pour the glycerin on top of the powder and then get back. And it usually within about 10 to 15 seconds, it'll combust into a bright pink flame. And I'll do a video on that soon. I was trying to do one this summer, but I was having a lot of camera issues. And but basically, the whole point is that if it was just those two chemicals worked as a fire starter alone, I wouldn't recommend carrying it in your bug out bag. But the fact is that both of them have both the chemicals, I should say, have so many different uses from a medicinal not just for purifying water, but for medicinal purposes. I mean, honestly, why wouldn't you not carry it? So again, it's called potassium permanganate. Permanganate is spelled Permanagate, I believe. If I spelled it wrong, I apologize. It's very simple. You can find it on Amazon.com. That's where I bought mine, from Wolf Labs, I believe. And it's fairly cheap. I got 2 bottles for, I want to say, less than $10. So yeah, pick up that. Yeah, and then basically, when I was talking about the medicinal purposes of urine, is they used to use urine for so many different things. They, cure athlete's foot. You can use it to kill an ear infection. I personally wouldn't use somebody else's urine to kill an ear infection, that's for sure. But that's one thing you can do with it. I'm trying to think. People used to donate urine to laundry. I'm trying to think here. Not laundromats, dry cleaners. I guess way back in the day, people used to urinate in big vats so that they could clean their whites because they would extract the ammonia somehow. Or I don't know if they would just use the urine purely or extract the ammonia. Either way, they would use the ammonia to clean whites, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me because urine tends to stain things we've all seen. Urine stain mattresses. So I guess if you don't leave it there and you just rinse it out, or I don't even know what the process was, and I really don't want to think about what that process was. But the point is that a lot of people discount human urine for a lot of things. They look at it with their nose turned up. And yes, I wouldn't recommend drinking it, at least not the first urine of the day, because that's what's going to have the most toxins in it. But there are a lot of people out there who have been put in like really bad prisons, stuff where like really nasty. I would say like something like on the equivalent of a Turkish prison, and they ended up, I guess when they were observing their surroundings. I apologize there. When they were observing their surroundings, they noticed that people were not drinking their urine. Now, I could speculate that, obviously, if these people were in prisons, they're probably not very, very smart, but people know how to survive. Obviously, the human race is still here after all the adversity we've faced. But the point is that I would also assume that it probably has partially to do with their diet, but people were not, this man noticed that people were not drinking their urine. They were, urinating and getting rid of it and doing away with their waste. So even in the most brutal conditions, most people will not break down and drink their urine. So I'm going to call him out. Some of you may be a fan of him, but Bear Grylls, he may have been in the military, in the French Foreign Legion, or whatever the hell crap he was in. I don't know. I don't care. Bear Grylls is a phony. When he goes out, he's got a whole craft services table, or MREs, whatever it is. Point is the guy who lives in the, relative lap of luxury as compared to somebody like us, the survivalist, the guy who has the show Survivor Man, who's a personal hero of mine, Les Stroud. Now, he's a smart man. He knows what he's talking about. I've read all of his books. He is the real deal. The man's nearly died a few times. He's had to be airlifted out of his filming area, the places where he went in to survive for long periods of time. He's had to be, multiple times, he's had to be airlifted out of there because he was severely dehydrated or so on and so forth. And one of the things he preaches that I disagree with is that you can drink water straight from a pond or a stream or lake, whatever it is, because the odds of the bacteria being in it is slim. But the whole thing is he's teaching short-term survival where you're intending to be picked up or looked for or rescued to a certain point. And I'm talking about survival where you really don't want to be found. I mean, when it comes to the nitty-gritty, survival in the real world, in the wilderness, is not a pretty thing. Animals starve. There's all these, like, I try to argue with all these hippy-dippy people who are, don't get me wrong, I want to protect the environment. I like trees. I like everything else, but there's these people who care more about animals than they do human beings. Now, to a degree, I'm the same way. I love my animals. I own a farm. I have dogs, cats, had chickens. I don't have them anymore. Long story short is I love animals. But when it comes down to it, I lost my train of thought here, guys. Need more caffeine. Hold on, take a sip of coffee. Anyway, when it comes down to it, people need to understand. I'm sick and tired of these people who think that humans, because it's our race, humans matter more than animals. Now, we need to learn how to live in harmony with animals and nature in general, because we are stewards of this earth, no matter what people want to say, and we do not have dominion over everything. They're absolutely right. But when it comes down to it, I like eating animals, and that's why I don't have chickens anymore. Some of them also didn't make it through the winter. But my point with that is that survival in the wilderness is not a pretty thing. Deer starve to death every winter. If you see a pack of deer on the side of the road, guarantee you a third of that, if it's a large pack, I should say, guarantee you a third of that pack is going to be dead before the winter's up. Some of those will be picked off by hunters. Some of them will starve to death. But a little tidbit that a lot of people don't know, my grandfather, a little tidbit about deer, not about my grandfather, but my grandfather was a conservational biologist, and he taught me a lot about animals and animal behavior, mostly with deer, because he was the one who studied the deer populations. And he hunted a lot. My grandfather, I never heard this story. I heard this story secondhand through my father, but my grandfather was the type of hunter that had just the coolest luck. Apparently, he was gutting out a deer, and another deer walked up on him, and he pulled up his rifle and shot that deer and gutted that deer out. This is a long time ago. Very long time ago. I think it was before my father was even born. I'll get into my grandfather in a little bit. He was actually a really awesome man. I learned a lot about him recently. What I was saying is that the reason, basically, I was basically segueing into why hunting is important. Hunting is important, and like I said, because those animals are going to starve to death. And a little known fact about deer is that they will starve other members of their herd to feed themselves. So when people try to tell you that hunting's cruel, that killing these animals is not right, well, guess what? That animal is probably going to freeze to death, cold, hungry, and alone, because all of its pack mates, if you want, or I don't even know what you call a herd of deer. Anyway, point is that it's the other members of its herd will starve it to death to feed themselves, and rightly so, to the mothers at least, because they're trying to feed their, get fuel to make milk for their babies. Long story short is that right now deer populations need to be culled because of the way things are. Now, that won't be an issue in the future. I talked about it previously on another show, that if the economy, let's just say because it happened before, if the economy crashes, like in the 1920s, then people are going to start hunting more. And it happened already. Here in my own home state of New York, people hunted out the turkey population and the white-tailed deer population to the point where we had to have the population restocked by the DEC by bringing in animals from another part of the country to fulfill that need, because we had hunted it out so much, and once we had recovered from the depression, that we ended up having to bring those animals in because everybody ate them all. And that's the whole thing. In this country, let's just say we took every edible game animal in the United States. That includes everything from bear all the way down to beaver. And we gave one edible animal to every person. And that includes waterfowl, all the birds that we can eat, ducks and all. that would only equate to less than one animal per person in the United States as it stands with the population. So that's all thing is, there's not enough meat to go around when it comes to the population we have without a modern infrastructure. So if the economy tanks, things are going to get really chaotic really fast, folks. And that's the thing that, like me and Bobby were talking about a little while ago, is that people don't want to admit it. So I urge you to invest in body armor. I am now sponsored through a company called AR 500 Armor. They are providing me with materials for some of my shows, which I'll get into in a little while. But they make a very reliable product. I just got my vest about 48 hours ago, and I've seen nothing but good reviews online. I've done my research. The design of their plates is also very ergonomic when it comes to wearing them. Shouldering a rifle is very comfortable with them when you set up the vest properly. And I'm a fairly big guy. Like I said, I'm 212, 6'2", and this vest sits on me nice. I didn't have to do much adjusting. I purchased for roughly about $300, a little less, rounding up. I purchased a nice vest called a Century Plate Carrier. Now, their Century Plate Carrier is actually very, very comfortable to wear. It's made to be put on and off really quickly. It's very high quality. I'm going to be doing a full review on it. I don't know, within the next few days. The stitching is high quality. You know, I have a lot of cheap tactical gear. I even have some military surplus vests that the military still uses today. I have a flak jacket that is from, I believe, Desert Storm, maybe a little newer, maybe Iraqi Freedom. Point is I have a lot of different forms of tactical gear. And so far, this one is better made than even some of the military gear that I own. I mean, the military does use slightly more heavy-duty things, like, for instance, the shoulder strapping is made out of, like, seatbelt material. Like, that's exactly what it feels, and that's the exact material it's made out of. I'm not quite sure what seatbelts are made out of. Either way, point is, it's made out of a material that, unless it's cut fairly well across, it's not going to rip. But it's very uncomfortable on my neck. It chafes my neck. If I hiked with it with a lot of gear on, it would dig into the corners of my neck right near my collarbone, and then I would start getting blisters, and I just didn't like wearing it. And if your gear's not comfortable, you're not going to wear it. I mean, right now it's sitting in my drawer all folded up because I don't like wearing it. So to our boys in camo, I guess you could say, I was going to say boys in blue, but they don't wear blue unless you're in the Navy. Anyway, to our boys in green, blue, brown, whatever camo you're wearing, I know what you're going through, guys, because I carry a lot of gear. At least from the gear carrying standpoint, I carry almost the same weight loadout as you guys do when I'm out, and everybody's like, oh, I could do this and I could do that. I'm like, do you realize that just to survive, you need to carry everything in the kitchen sink to have any kind of small, minimal level of comfortability? And even then, you're still going to be miserable. There's still going to be bugs. It's going to be cold. You're going to smell like smoke, and you're going to have a headache from breathing in campfire smoke all the time. Survival out in the woods or on the move is not a fun thing. That's why we became agrarian. That's why we became non-nomadic people. That's why agrarian, for those of you who don't know, means we started farming. The reason why we started farming was because our society started getting bigger. We started living longer. We started becoming old, so it was harder to travel and be nomadic with old people that you cared about in your group, unless you were just a total jerk and like, oh, screw you, grandma, which I'm sure it does happen. But point is that we started domesticating animals. We started raising livestock and growing crops because we figured out it was easier to grow a bunch of crops and bear through the winter if you live in a northern climate like I do here in New York. It's easier to store up a bunch of stuff and bear it through the winter than it is to travel and possibly lose a good amount of your group along the way. Because it is true. I mean, if you think about a group of people who are traveling across the United States who are like, we're going to California. By the time they got to California, they were a completely different group of people. Grandma obviously didn't make it. Grandpa obviously didn't make it. by the time, dad gets a cut on his finger, he dies of gangrene of his pinky, and then mom's with some new guy, and then they have kids, and by the time you get there, you got half brothers and sisters that you didn't even know existed until you finally meet up, and you're like, holy crap, I didn't even know you guys still existed because your group somehow got separated, and you're like, well, we're still going to California anyway. My point is this. Things happen all the time out there, and those people knew how to survive in the wilderness a lot better than we did. They were building cabins, they were hunting their own food. I mean, look at Lewis and Clark. They had to have a Native American lead them around and show them how to survive off the land. Otherwise, they wouldn't have even made it because they didn't know what the hell they were doing for the most part. But my point is this: there's a lot of people who are exploring. There's little things that you can learn. For instance, spruce needles from the pine family. You can boil them into a tea and get vitamin C from them. So there was all these people, all these travelers, all these settlers who were dying of scurvy from lack of vitamin C when vitamin C was right above them the entire time, hanging from the pine boughs that they were sleeping under. So the point is that there's a lot of hidden secrets that a lot of people think they know, but they end up having not a single damn clue about survival. And I've noticed there's 3 different types of people when it comes to survival. There is the extremely cocky, who are probably going to die faster than the unprepared, because when you become that confident in your abilities that you're cocky and you think that you can survive anything, you tend to make a lot of mistakes because you think you can't make mistakes. There's the unprepared, who are obviously going to die just as quickly as the mentally ill-prepared. And then there's the people in the middle who know, all right, I don't know everything, I need to learn more, but I know that I'm not completely unprepared. And those are the people who tend to make it because they understand that there is little room for error and that they have to be careful and not make any mistakes. So basically, complacency breeds danger, ladies and gentlemen, and that's really what it comes down to. Is if you sit there and think that, oh well, somebody else is going to do it for me, then it's never going to happen. And I liken it to when people are musicians. I'm a musician. I've been playing guitar for a very long time. I find it funny. I work in the music industry. I work at public events. I work for concerts. I've met a lot of celebrities. A lot of them are jerks. Some of them are nice. Moving on. Point is people, what do you call it? When it comes to the public events and everything else, Jesus, my brain is not cooperating with me today, guys. I apologize for this. I'm normally a lot more articulate than I normally am today, and I'm getting very frustrated with myself right now. So where was I? Oh, normally there's somebody there like, oh, you were talking about this, Z-Man. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. When it comes down to it, when it comes to the whole danger thing, what I was getting at is, like, for instance, my job is very dangerous. If I'm not careful, I can end up getting hurt. Because there's a lot going on. There's a lot of heavy, like literally 2-ton cases being rolled around on these little wheel casters. And I almost got my ankle broken one time because some idiot was pushing a case behind me and he didn't realize I was there and rammed the case into the back of my ankle. Thankfully, I was wearing hardcore boots. Anyway, my point is that the only time I've ever gotten hurt on the job site is when I was walking around like, oh, nothing's going to happen to me. But when I'm walking around with my head on a swivel, like, all right, I could possibly get hit by this, blah, 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 blah. That's when I have had close calls, but I've gotten out of the way in time. And that's basically what it comes down to, is keep your head on a swivel. Do what you got to do and make sure that when it comes down to it, you're prepared. Because, like I ask all the time, my whole sign-off motto is, are you ready? And I'll even admit to a lot of certain degrees as a prepper, I'm not ready. If the apocalypse started right now, I would not be ready for a lot of different things. I have a decent amount of food put away for like maybe 2 weeks to feed my family, 3 weeks. So for a normal natural disaster, I'm prepared. So I'm kind of ready. But when it comes to the apocalypse, no, I'm not ready. And I don't think anybody really could be ready unless you're a millionaire. which is one thing that ticks me off about like doomsday preppers. Number one, why the hell would you go on a show that's going to advertise all the stuff you have? Because anybody who knows you a little bit is just going to get an insight as to what your house looks like, where you keep your preps, what you have as your preps, what kind of firearms you have, so that they can come up with a counter strategy to deal with it. Like, all right, he's got an M1A1, blah, 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 that shoots this caliber, cartridge. Well, guess what? I'm going to get this particular rifle that I know has a farther range. For instance, all you got to do, I know for a fact that he's only got submachine guns. Well, then you stay back at 300-400 yards with a decent rifle and pick them off from a distance. There's a counter strategy for anything in combat. So if you know what you're doing, and people, there's plenty of people out there who have no problem taking what you got and laughing as you lay there and bleed on the floor, folks. And we all know that's true. So when it comes down to it, you got to be ready, and you got to be ready to defend yourself with your life, which is why I bought body armor. It's why I have firearms, and that's why me and my family are investing in things like silver and gold. You need to invest in tangible objects, because once the economy tanks, U.S. currency, or any currency for that matter, because everybody in the world relies on American currency, the currency really depend, or the currency will become it'll just be worthless paper. It'll be a paper with a dead guy on it with a 1, a 50, 100, or whatever denomination of cash that it's made out to be. But my point is that our economy is based on what's called the petrodollar. Now, for those who don't know what a petrodollar is, and I'm sure most of the listeners do, the petrodollar was, I could be wrong, I believe it was 1969. I could be completely wrong on the year, but Richard Nixon made a deal with a bunch of countries, China, Russia, and all them, where they were investing in American dollars, because American dollars used to be $30 for an ounce of gold. Now, I believe it was back then. Obviously, now gold has skyrocketed. Now, Nixon took us off what was known as the gold standard, because all these countries invested in gold, and we're coming on a 3-minute mark, so if you guys are out there listening live, I'm going to come back and we'll go for a part 3. Anyway, my point is, or I should say part 2 for this podcast. Sorry. Anyway, my point is that Nixon took us off the gold standard. And anybody who really knows the history is probably banging their head on their dashboard of their car right now, like, you have no idea what the F you're talking about, man. I'm just giving these people the short long of it. If you really want to know, look up Nixon gold standard, and it'll probably tell you everything you want to know. Anyway, Nixon took us off the gold standard because all these countries converted their money into American dollars, which obviously would represent more gold in Fort Knox. Now, I and a lot of people think that it was just a con job so that they can get a bunch of gold stored up in I believe it was Fort Knox, and then make it disappear into their own bank accounts and stuff like that, and probably for war efforts. Anyway, well, we can speculate where all that money went. The point is that once all the countries started asking about where that money is and where the gold is, all of a sudden Nixon decided to take us off the gold standard so that they couldn't cash out their cash and take their gold with them. Then, once that happened, our money became based in nothing. So what they had to value our money in something. So what did they do? They switched it over to barrels of oil. So basically, our money is valued by what OPEC values barrels of oil at. Now, you would think that would be a good thing, considering that our economy and pretty much the world's economy runs on oil, but that's not the case, because we all see that OPEC's they're artificially finding reasons to inflate their prices, jack it up, and keep us basically on our knees, because the simple fact is the reason why all these prices are rising is because of the price of gasoline. I mean, I remember when I was young, I'm 26 years old, I remember when I was a little kid, gas was like $1 something a gallon, and you could go anywhere you wanted for a fairly, with a car for a fairly cheap amount of money. And the whole thing is that because, and I'm explaining this to a younger crowd, I'm sure anybody who's older is well aware of this, that basically is that when the price of gas goes up, the price of food goes up, because it costs more to get supplies to the stores, because everything we get is on a day-to-day basis, basically. If everything is so well-timed nowadays when it comes to our infrastructure that it's there, a lot of the stuff that they run out of is digitally accounted for and delivered that night So basically, if, let's just say, all the gasoline in every vehicle, every gas tank in the world were to suddenly be evaporated, it would end up making it turn into a Mad Max situation, because all the food in the stores would end up going bad. What do you call it? We're going to go to part 2.